Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have an upload that is jam-packed full of terrifying encounters, as well as an update on that second DNA panel. Before we get into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below, my merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook version. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It is absolutely free. Click the like button. And please, leave a comment. It really does help, and guys, it definitely matters. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload, shall we? Today's first part of the upload is the update on the DNA panel. My friend Andrew gave me a call yesterday at around 6:30 and said that the second DNA panel sample results have come back. And I said, what's the verdict? He said, well, it's good news and strange news. And I said, all right. He said, it's the same exact thing as the first. Crocata, with a extra gene that is unknown, an unknown gene added to this. I said, what does this mean? And he said, Jeff, I have no idea. This is beyond me. I said, all right. I said, I know someone that may have some answers. That person, ironically enough, messaged me. And I'm going to message him back sometime today and run all of this by him, because he is probably the most scientific person I know, and that would be Steph, because I have no clue. I sat here last night. I actually called Carl and I said, hey, let me ask you a question. Do you know if there is any kind of rancher that may have imported a hyena? You know, Texas has all sorts of kind of very wealthy people that import all sorts of wild animals from all over the world. And, you know, ranching is good money, so it was worth the question, you know. He said, no, I'm not aware of anyone in the area. He said, I've never heard of a hyena existing in America. And I said, well, I've heard of strange accounts of people seeing things that resemble a hyena. There's been multiple Dogman accounts that the creature resembles a hyena. And, just last year, when there was this kind of uproar of a picture of a gentleman who had shot a hyena, and it was labeled like it had happened in America, which it didn't. It was a photograph out of Africa, and I had talked about it a little bit because I was misled by the captions and everything like that. And a couple of subscribers had reached out. A female subscriber, actually a female subscriber's friend, another woman, reached out and had a sighting of a hyena-like dogman. There are multiple accounts of hyena-like dogmen. So without knowing anymore, and I really don't want to throw out my crazy ideas to you guys right now because I want to run them by Steph first and see if there is a possibility of this. But that's the second DNA panel results back, and I'm at a loss of words. It's not what I expected. It's definitely not what I expected. But as last night happened, I started to look and do some research on the hyena and other things like that. And I kept looking at the spotted hyena, which would be the crocuta crocuta. And if you look at it when it's down on all fours, the way people describe a dogman's stance would be very similar to a hyena. They have these huge front legs and these shorter back legs. And then I saw a picture of a guy holding some kind of meat or something up, and the hyena was standing on its back legs trying to get the food. You know, I mean, we've all seen pets do this. They don't do it for a couple seconds and then, of course, drop back down. But while this hyena stood for this guy to, he's taunting him with food, that thing was as big as the guy, as tall as the guy. So I got a whole bunch of ideas going through my head about this, and I'm probably wrong about all of them, but I just don't want to sound like an idiot throwing ideas out there without talking to someone first. And Steph would be the person that I trusted the most about this with the scientific background that he has. So with that, let's get into some encounters. So with that being said, about the hyena-like dogmen, and once again, I am not saying that this is what a dogman is. I'm just letting you know what this sample is, and I'm really weirded out. But with that being said, here is a hyena-like dogman sighting. Let me say first and foremost, I'm a man of logic and explanation. I've never believed in ghosts or cryptid beings, but something happened the other night that had me very weirded out. I live somewhere in between country and town here in Manatee County, Florida, near the Myakka River State Park, and see an abundance of wildlife. Fox, coyote, raccoon, all very normal to see. Since there is a large fox population around here and most people have chickens, everyone has large dogs, including myself. I have a 70-pound male and a 60-pound female pit bull. They're fearless. They know this is their property and they protect it as such, alerting me if they hear anything. And if they do, I open the door and let them run out and chase off whatever is out there. The other night I woke up randomly, and it was disturbingly quiet outside, like not a single cricket. And my dogs were not on my bed like they usually are. All of a sudden a howl like I have never heard went off like a siren, and sent a chill down my spine. Like a deep yell almost, but definitely from an animal. I turned the lights on in my home to see my pit bulls at the back of their dog crate shaking. I've never seen them look like this before. Purely terrified, so I turned all the lights back off, grabbed a flashlight, and looked out the back window. What I saw, about 200 yards by the tree line near the back of my property, was a dog thing. I vaguely saw it, but it was very similar to a hyena, built with a large amount of fur on its neck like a mane, almost, and skinny back legs. Its head looked very wolf-like, with erect ears and a large skull. It was huge. It was so black it was hard to make out distinct characteristics, but its presence scared basically any living thing that was around, it seemed that night. The next morning, I went to the spot where I had seen this creature, and I found no tracks or hair, anything. But I know what I saw, and I've never seen anything like it before. We've been having a lot of dead dogs in the area, dogs that are large and are being killed by something. Other people think it's coyotes or feral dog, but I think it's the thing that I saw. Just seeing my dog so terrified really scared me. Tonight's second encounter. I'm not really sure if this would be considered a paranormal, cryptid story per se, but nothing else really makes sense. Let me explain. My family would go camping every chance we got. The place we'd always go had no natural predators, at least nothing bigger than a fox. My dad specifically chose this spot so us kids, me and my two siblings, could frolic through the woods without having to worry. This particular trip was during the May long weekend. There was still a considerable amount of snow, so my dad brought our ATVs and some sleds for us. It was the day after we had arrived, and my dad wanted to go on a little trip down the road we had come up. I asked if I could go with him, and he said sure. We both hopped on his quad and set out on our little journey. I also forgot to mention earlier that we had deer around this area, nothing crazy, but the odd one would wander through the campsite. You could tell they had no natural predators since they didn't run away when there was a human around. My siblings and I would always manage to get pretty close to one before my parents yelled at us to stay away from it, and that was it. Anyway, my dad and I are a few miles from camp, and we rounded a corner and came across the most gruesome sight I had ever seen in my life. On the side of the road, there were pieces of deer, at least I think it was one. There was blood absolutely everywhere. Worse still, there was a stream coming from the remains, which meant this was recent. My dad is usually a pretty calm guy. Not much can rattle him, but I could tell that this freaked him out. He was in the process of turning us around when this, screech, growl, howl came from the forest. It was so loud, we both flinched. I remember searching the forest for the source, but my dad was in the process of hauling ass down the way we had come. It could have been a trick of the light, or because I was freaked out and maybe I'm seeing things, but I could have sworn I saw something running alongside of us, but only for a second or two. I know I sound absolutely crazy, but the thing looked like a large dog before it vanished into the trees. My dad raced back to camp, and we were all packed up and headed to a different location by the end of that day. We never did go back to that campsite after that encounter. I did ask my dad about it a couple years back. He just said it was because the new campsite was better than the old, better trails and whatnot. I think he's full of crap. I think whatever we encountered that day scared him so badly, and I think that whatever I saw, he did too, but I, for one, am thankful we never went back. I'm not sure if I will be able to sleep at night after what I saw. It still haunts me to this day. Tonight's third encounter is a subscriber submission. I'm no novice when it comes to living in the country. Home has always been Southern Illinois for me. We have more areas of Shawnee National Forest everywhere you go down here. My husband of 24 years and I have lived where we are right now for about 10 years. We live just close enough to a small town to make shopping easy, but in the country and surrounded by heavy woods and swamp behind us and to the side. A big creek full of fish and farmland in front that's surrounded by woods. Our daughters lived with us until they finished up high school, and on several occasions would tell us how uncomfortable they felt, like they were being watched outside at night. When we first moved in, my husband's dog had puppies, and I got stuck potty training, which meant I would have to take them out before I went to bed. It was one of these nights when I began hearing a strange animal noise that frightened me. It was like any animal I had ever heard. The noise, as I described it to my husband, was like squealing tires plus the added canine-type howling sound. These always came from the back in the woods or swamp behind the house. I heard that noise so much I've learned to just expect it, but I've never got used to the heavy feeling of being watched. We had been here for several years without anything happening. My husband was heading up to the country road to see a neighbor, but got stopped in his tracks less than a half a mile away by a large herd of deer running across the road being chased by two huge canine-looking animals. He had his phone handy when the deer began to cross and was in awe of the two dogs. Chasing after them, he showed me the original video, which was lost when he broke his phone, hadn't uploaded the video. I do apologize for not being able to provide it to you. The dogs were like anything I had ever seen. Even he couldn't believe how huge they were. They were bigger than the biggest buck. They ran on all fours the entire time. They ran fast, but looked very awkward because of their front legs being much longer than their rear, and its head and chest were huge. I was scared to think something that big was on the loose. I was concerned that they could be attracted by the scent of our dogs, and although our backyard is fenced in, I know it would be very, very easy for them to get over this 4.5-foot tall fence. Fast forward a couple years for the next experience. Now I suffer from health problems that make it almost impossible to sleep. I was in the bathroom at around 3 in the morning one night, and had the window open which faces the woods. My dogs began going crazy. They had been doing this regularly for a couple of weeks. Then I began hearing heavy footsteps of something on 2 legs, walking up to the side of the house. All my dogs but one ran scared to the porch. My Alaskan Malamute wolf dog was the last one left growling and snarling at what she saw. Then by my window I heard deep raspy panting or breathing. My wolf dog finally joined the others. The breathing by my window continued for what seemed like several minutes, but I know it wasn't. I heard it take a few steps and then it was gone. Another late night and my dogs are reacting the very same way. I decided to be brave and see what it was this time. I stepped out onto the back porch with my husband's spotlight. What I saw, I cannot erase. In the darkness, 200 feet behind my backyard, my light illuminated a black mass that had huge yellowish amber eyes. When the light hit it, it shrank down into the tall weeds and proceeded to make its way over to a large tree. It stood up behind that tree and looked straight at me. I could see those bright eyes as well as a huge black head with long pointed ears. Whenever it began to growl, its ears flattened back, just like a dog's when it's angry. That deep, angry growl resonated in every cell and my heart was pounding. The growl scared my dogs in the house. I ran in and got my husband, but it was gone when he got outside. In the morning, he measured the spot on the tree where I saw the eyes, and top of its head. It measured over 7 feet tall. Then, just the other day, May 18th, at noon, I came home from town. It was pouring rain, but not at all hard to see. I was less than a mile from my house when a tall, solid black bipedal creature ran across the highway within a few feet of my car into the heavy woods. I couldn't rationalize this. I was seeing this creature in the absolute daylight. The creature had a huge wolf head, a large muscular chest and arms. It ran very fast. I tried to tell myself that I couldn't have seen it, but I did. And so did the driver on the oncoming truck. I was so freaked out I felt I should pull over and get myself together. But I was too scared after watching it run so close to my car. I haven't actually said out loud what I saw was a Dogman in daylight. I'm still freaking out about it, and not at all feeling safe. I'm really not sure if it keeps coming around my house due to the wolf dog. She looks and howls and has the attitude of a true wolf, only she's been raised by me. I didn't know if she was attracting this thing. Needless to say, I'm well armed when I go out at night, especially if my dogs are acting up. I'm wondering if I need to be armed 24/7 now that I've seen this thing in daylight. Thanks, Jeff. Tonight's fourth encounter. Today's fourth encounter. Over the past couple of months, there have been a few strange occurrences going outside of my home. I live on the outskirts of a city in central California, which is fairly rural. Animals are not uncommon pests, particularly coyotes, which I first suspected. Every so often, late at night, I would hear the side gate to my backyard rattle from my bedroom window, at least 2 times. It was loud enough for me to assume that it was my dog trying to get out of the yard, and I'd run out the front door trying to catch him, only to discover he was not there and was in a different part of the yard entirely. Odd, but I chalked it up to maybe a squirrel or possum or something. Once, when my dog was with me in the living room, again late at night, he suddenly started barking and howling at something outside the glass door to the backyard. It was so out of nowhere that it freaked me out, because he's not much of a guard dog in the first place and doesn't go crazy over anything. I immediately shushed him because I didn't want him to wake my parents up, and I turned the backyard floodlights on to see if there was anything out there. Nothing that I could see. Still, when I turned the lights out, my dog was growling at something in that darkness. Then a few weeks later, I was up late at night again, at around 3 or 4 in the morning, and I heard the side gate rattle, and then suddenly heard something on the roof. It sounded huge, and it scrambled from one side of the roof to the other and then back again at lightning speed. It was loud enough, too, once again, get my dog barking, only this time he was in the garage at the exact opposite end of the house as my bedroom, where I was. I was slightly unnerved, but once again, I made the possum assumption. A couple of nights later, when I started having second thoughts. At about midnight, just as my mom went to bed, and I was watching some TV, I heard what sounded like someone at the front door. Not someone knocking or speaking, but trying to open the door via the pin pad locking device, like someone is pressing the buttons, which beep when you touch them, and then a soft thud, like they were trying to open the door to see if the combination worked. By now, I'm in fight mode, thinking I have to physically defend my home. So I go to the door and turn the porch light on and look out the windows. At the top of the door, there was nothing there. I was a little freaked out, but I cannot argue with what I see, so I had to chalk it up to my imagination. A few hours later, just after 4 in the morning, I'm in bed, about to go to sleep, when I hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps in the gravel path outside by my bedroom window. Between my window and the gravel is a row of large brush. No one can walk straight up to my window without me hearing the rustle, and I didn't. Instead, the footsteps stopped dead in their tracks, and suddenly something large is scrambling on the top of the roof at breakneck speed. I cannot stress enough how loud and heavy the footsteps were, and to me it sounded like 2 feet and not 4. So, in those few moments, I was absolutely certain that it was a person outside my window, perhaps coming back to try and get to the front door again. But then it was instantly on the top of my roof. In all certainty, was gone. The next day I checked the gravel path and the brush, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. What's more is I'm almost 200 pounds, and just my regular walk was not nearly as loud as the footsteps I heard. I would have to be stomping around to make that sound. The roof is about 7 feet off the ground at its lowest, so whatever it was could either make that leap in one shot, or it was large enough to climb to the top without disturbing the brush. I shudder to think the latter. This final experience is very close to where my aunt was just at. Now, this is not her encounter, but my aunt lives on Mount Desert Island in Maine, and there is a very famous camping spot that a lot of people who live in northern Maine go to called Baxter State Park, but it's Baxter. I'm just joking. That's how she sounds. So this is not her experience, but nonetheless, let's get into it. In 1981, my friends lived in a rural cabin near Baxter State Park, Maine. The road was only traveled by residents. You could drive on it and not expect to see any other cars. I was driving up there one night, and as I went around the last bend before reaching the cabin, an 8-foot-tall Bigfoot was standing on the side of the road. It was massive. It had to be 4 feet across at the shoulders with this brownish blonde fur. I then noticed that it was a male. His skin was dark, the face had a long beard and looked both ape and human-like. Stood there motionless looking at me. I was freaked out when my headlights were on him, and we actually had made contact. He was not 20 feet from me. I sped past and then into my friend's driveway, ran into the cabin screaming that I had seen a huge Bigfoot. A couple years later, I bought a small property near Mount Blue State Park, Maine. One winter, a friend was visiting from Utah. My boyfriend and his friends were out on snowmobiles that night. Later, we were inside the cabin and started hearing these bizarre growls, like no noise I had ever heard before or since. The growls got louder and louder, and then whatever it was started screaming, literally shaking the cabin. It was right outside. I ran toward the door and placed the board barricade through the loop. As soon as I did that, something was pulling and shaking the door on the other side. Each time we changed our position in the cabin, that part of the cabin would be attacked. We were terrified. My boyfriend had brought a pistol, so I grabbed it. We climbed the ladder to the bedroom. Whatever that thing was, it landed on the roof above us. Its screams were the scariest thing we had ever heard. They were impossible to repeat. Just as we thought our lives were over, we could hear the snowmobiles coming back. Whatever that thing was ran off. We told the guys what had happened, and they went to look for any tracks at first. They thought we were crazy until they saw some huge unknown prints with long claw marks in the snow. There were deep scratches on the window frames outside the walls. My boyfriend is an experienced hunter and could not explain the prints or the deep claw marks. I moved out west to California. There is no way I was staying in that cabin, let alone in Maine. And yes, Maine does have its fair share of Bigfoot and Dogman encounters. The Palmyra, Maine Dogman family attack, whatever you want to call it. That's a very strange attack. I saw it when I was probably 20-something years old. Heard about it and then saw thing. But then, what's funny is all the residents tried to discredit the family that it happened to. Almost makes you think that the local government up there had some say in that. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Like I said about the DNA panel results, I'm going to talk with Steph a little later today or tomorrow. I just can't explain it. This is not what I expected. I honestly don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect this. Anyway, with that, everyone stay safe. Thank you for all your support. Does mean the world to me, and may the Great Spirit watch out over us all and guide us down that path that we call life.